Hello, welcome to Things Are Not What They Seem live stream. What you see here is the Oklahoma City Murrah building after the bombing in 1995. What I believe was the single most heinous act on American soil up to that point. And what I do believe this was designed to do was, in all truth, alienate any civilian or grassroots movement, militia organization was going to radicalize them and disassociate them with any public forums or any local groups or any mainstream. This was to completely alienate them from society again. The militia movement, in my opinion, was MK Ultra and divided on this day by this chain of events. Because they saw all this coming. You have to realize that these patent lawyers see all of our future technology. Our world will literally shape itself out before their eyes 20 years in advance, and they have the ability to pass legislation to protect their investments, what they see. I mean, it's the same old story. And what this is about here is oppressing us before the fact, before we got all this power, before we realize our full potential as a society with these social platforms and how they can put a system like this into checks and balances. They don't want us to realize that we have the power through jury nullification and disagreeing with the laws themselves to set the things straight that we need to set straight. They don't want you to know that. They don't want to tell you that. It's illegal to actually tell a juror they've got a right to set someone free because they believe, even in those circumstances, that person's absolutely guilty of that crime, but they disagree with the law itself. They can set that person free on those grounds. And since we have a case law system and not a code law system, that's called a precedent, and any future crimes or any future cases that resemble that could be tossed out of court on that basis. So yeah, jury nullification is a very effective tool. It's something they don't want us to know about, and any attempt to educate people of the fact that they have that right will result in a lot of weight being thrown around, and you'll get into a lot of trouble. So this is how they operate. They operate in a very nefarious manner. They see what works, and they continue to use it over and over again, just like a mean-ass bossy dog. All right. Anyway, welcome to the stream. I've got a very energetic, beautiful, giant Rottweiler playing as we do this, and you'll see her. And I'm not going to tell her to lay down and be good and just shut up, and it's just not my style. I love my dog, and she can chill. As long as she's not taking over the nation, we're in good shape. At least not unless I'm in control of her, and she can take over whatever she wants. All right, so let's get down to business. Let's change this scene. Now we have no scene. Okay, so let's go back to scene 4. And let's change a couple things around. Let's remove this. Bonk. There we go. Now we're back about Ruby Ridge. Okay, I don't know what that was. Ignore the earthquakes. It's the Rottweiler hitting the sides of my chair. They are earthquakes, so granted. So let me see where we are. Okay, so our desktop is showing. The History channel is showing. I'll go there and I'll start talking about Ruby Ridge. Right there's Randy Weaver, the gentleman on the right here in the gray shirt. And that's Randy Weaver. Let's just start there. Now, Ruby Ridge. Ruby Ridge was a location. Now, a lot of people have heard about this and they probably know it, but it doesn't hurt to revisit these things as they're recalled. And unfortunately, in this case, probably in the mainstream media, but these facts were pretty much clear cut. Not much was hidden. Ruby Ridge was the location of a violent 11-day standoff in remote Boundary County, Idaho, beginning on August 21st, 1992. U.S. Marshals and federal agents faced off against Randy Weaver, his wife and 5 children, and his friend Kevin Harris. The Ruby Ridge incident was the culmination of years of investigation into Weaver by local authorities. The FBI and ATF and the Secret Service had ended with shooting deaths of a U.S. Marshal, his wife Vicky, and their teenage son Samuel. All for what? Okay, anyway. Who Randy Weaver was. Randy was a college dropout and former Green Beret. He and his wife Vicky were religious fundamentalists who distrusted the government and believed the end of the world was imminent. They started hoarding guns and making plans to move to a secluded area and live off the grid. In 1984, Randy, Vicky, and their children moved into a cabin they built themselves overlooking Ruby Creek in Idaho. By choice, they had no electricity or running water. Hold on 1 second. Baby. Hold on. Sit. Down. Good. I'm not going to bully you. Listen and be good. Please. Good girl. Thank you, baby. So now, got my beautiful Rottweilers laying down here. You have a guard dog, or you're going to teach a dog to be a warrior. They're completely useless if you can't control them around, that potential threat. You have to put them in the other room or put them up, and they're useless. Anyway, Randy Weaver was a college dropout and former Green Beret. He and his wife Vicky were religious fundamentalists who distrusted the government and believed the end of the world was imminent. They started hoarding guns and making plans to move to a secluded area and live off the grid. Pretty much, they just want to be left alone. In 1984, Randy, Vicky, and their children moved to a cabin they'd built themselves overlooking Ruby Creek in Idaho. By choice, they had no electricity, no running water. They were just doing their own thing, man. That was it. But apparently, that's become an illegal thing to do. After receiving information that the Weaver had threatened President Ronald Reagan and other government officials from the mountains, and the FBI and Secret Service opened an investigation. No charges were filed, but investigators documented that Weaver had ties to the Aryan nation. Weaver denied the claim. It was all just people's imagination really getting the worst of them. I mean, they're just doing their thing and looking at things from a realistic perspective. I mean, you got to be self-sufficient when you're out in the mountains. You need to protect yourselves. You need to watch out for people coming and misleading you or lying to you or selling you, magic seeds. So is the stories of Jack and the Beanstalk and all this shit. So anyway, in 1989, undercover ATF agents claimed Weaver sold them illegal sawed-off shotguns, and turns out they were like 1/32nd of 1/64th of 1/1,000,000th and 357,000th of an inch too short. So you could argue it was total entrapment, but that's not the point. So he missed the February trial and warrant, and a warrant was issued for his arrest. Now, this is the beginning of the end. If you don't pay a ticket in society, and any offense that's corrected, punished, enforced through a fine or a ticket is ultimately enforced with bodily harm, with a threat of bodily harm. Please. So if they give you a ticket and you ignore it, obviously the next thing is they're going to send you a notice in the mail to show up in court. And if you don't show up in court, they're going to come bring you before a judge, and they will drag you, if necessary, to answer your charges, and so on and so forth. So, that's how this crazy stuff is supposed to work. But somehow these people want to circumvent that process. So in 1989, undercover agents claimed Weaver sold them illegal sawed-off shotguns and offered him the chance to become an informant on the Aryan nations. What they did was they tricked him into selling him a short barreled shotgun and said, "Look, dude, if you don't work with us now and catch this Aryan nation, we're gonna fuck you up. You're gonna lose your farm. Your wife's gonna fucking leave you. Your kids are not gonna have a future." This is how they operate. They don't come in and sit down with pens and pencils and say, "Okay." They say, "Look, dude, you do what we say, or your life's over." Pretty much what they put out there for him. And well, after being released on bail in 1989, undercover agents claimed Weaver sold them illegal sawed-off shotguns and offered him the chance to become an informant on the Aryan Nation. When Weaver refused, he was indicted for making and keeping illegal weapons. After being released on bail, his trial was set for February 1991, but his probation officer told him it wasn't until March 20th. So after he's released on bail, his trial was set for February, but his probation officer told him it wasn't until March 20th on purpose. So when he missed his February trial and a warrant was issued for his arrest, quit. March 20th came and went without appearance from Weaver. A grand jury indicted him for failure to appear, and that's when things escalated. They attempted to negotiate with him over the next year, failed, and he remained at large, and that's when it escalated to a standoff. So this is a good example of how a ticket can escalate to a full fucking blown standoff where you get arrested, killed, or everything else happens to you. So yes, everything, all of our rules, all of our laws are enforced with this threat, and though be it may appear subtle, it may be hidden, but ultimately you keep breaking them rules and it's going to end up the same way. They're going to drag your ass away. So, Weaver missed the February trial and warrant was issued for his arrest. The March 20th trial came in and went without appearance from Weaver. Obviously, didn't know he was supposed to fucking be there. After a grand jury indicted him for failure to appear at his trial, attempts to negotiate with Weaver over the next year failed and he remained at large. So they surrounded his compound and they just waited. Marshals planned Weaver's arrest. Like I said, they parked their asses and they waited for him to leave. And I think this is their, apparently we'll see what they said. The U.S. Marshal Service was responsible for bringing in the now fugitive Weaver. So now they had to bring him in without anything happening, without a war breaking out, without people getting killed, without agents getting shot at, without him getting killed. So they could talk to him. That was the problem. They planned a covert takedown to gather intelligence, survey the terrain, and his family, and all that shit. Well, that didn't go out too well. Surveillance began, and the Weaver family became more and more isolated. Vicky became, hey, Angel, plots. Surveillance began, and the Weaver family became more and more isolated. Vicky Weaver gave birth to a baby girl at home and cared for her family as best she could under the difficult circumstances. So you've got a government completely oppressing you, cutting you off from the rest of the world, all because they pretty much want your land. U.S. Marshal Service was responsible for all this stuff. The U.S. Marshal Service was responsible for bringing in the now fugitive Weaver, giving Weaver's weapons arsenal an anti-government stance. They determined he would not give up peacefully. They planned a covert takedown to gather intelligence, survey the terrain and the Weaver family, and hopefully eventually arrest the Weaver. Surveillance began, and the Weaver family became more and more isolated. Vicky Weaver gave birth to a baby girl at home and cared for her family as best as she could. Things got very crazy. Surveillance teams noted the Weavers were almost always armed and decided to settle in for the long haul. They planned to infiltrate the Night family unit with the help of a male and family undercover deputy posing as the Weavers' newest neighbors. So, the deputies knew the rugged terrain and they knew the property well, and they basically sat out that day on the morning of August 21st, 1992. As the team prepared to gather intelligence, the dogs became aware of their presence. The dogs smelled them. The dogs Sammy Weaver, Randy Weaver, and Kevin Harris gave chase as surveillance teams scattered. They did their jobs. They were chasing villains off the property that were sneaking around and acting suspicious. That's what they're supposed to do. So on the morning of August 21st, Everybody did what they were supposed to do. As the team prepared to gather intelligence for the day, the dogs became aware of their presence. The dogs started acting accordingly, which would have been aggressive at that point, in my opinion. And one of the a firefight ensued, leaving the 14-year-old Sammy Weaver, Marshall Dagan, and one of the Weaver's dogs dead. Who shot first and who shot whom would later be hotly debated by all the survivors in the courts and in the media. But the carnage wasn't over yet. As the Weaver family holed up in their cabin, grieving Sammy and planning to their next steps, Deputy Hunt called for help. Desperate to get Marshall Dagan's body off the mountain and end the standoff. And I understand that, but these guys had already broken so many laws. On August 27th, the FBI, under the impression they were entering an active, unprovoked firefight against U.S. Marshals, if you can believe that, arrived on Ruby Ridge as hundreds of law enforcement officers and federal agents surged into the area with the usual orders to shoot any armed adult on sight. FBI snipers set up a perimeter. Excuse me one second. Knock it off, okay? What's up with you? Lay down. Place. This is not a party. You're my dog. Fucking listen and pay attention. Sometimes you gotta do that because your dog knows you are distracted and they have a tendency to capitalize on that. So anyway, thank you, Mutt. On August 22nd, the FBI, under the impression they were entering an active, unprovoked firefight against U.S. Marshals, arrived on Ruby Ridge as hundreds of law enforcement officers and federal agents surged into the area with the unusual orders to shoot any armed adult on sight. So they were told on August 27th, the FBI was told, or they were under the impression that they were entering an active, unprovoked firefight against U.S. Marshals. So the FBI thought they were walking into an active, unprovoked firefight like they had been set up at Ruby Ridge. Arrived at Ruby Ridge as hundreds of law enforcement agents surged into the area with the unusual orders to shoot any armed adult on sight. FBI snipers set up a perimeter, hoping to force Weaver to negotiate. Negotiate what? His surrender, I guess. Weaver had none of it, however, and ignored all negotiation attempts, including pleas from his sister. After hearing the nearby shed where they'd brought Sammy's body earlier, Weaver and Harris, along with Weaver's 16-year-old daughter Sarah's trailing behind, were shot by the FBI sniper, Lon, or whatever, who thought the men were about to fire on a helicopter. So this was just a bloodbath, and it was ridiculous. It was carried out by the FBI. This is what really sprouted and started the modern day militia movement. People saw this happen and they were enraged, and they started forming their little local militias, and they started rebelling against the government, so to speak. They started being more outspoken against things that the government did that they saw as precarious acts. They started alienating themselves from the government, going out and practicing exercises and exercising their rights to carry guns and load them and run around with them and practice and get better at protecting against the tyrannical, overbearing government. And that made everyone very nervous. And so that's why I believe things like the Oklahoma sitting event happened. Things started getting a little much of a concern for them, so they thought they'd put the brakes on to society and blame it on the militias and think that and start to outlaw the fringe. They don't want us to become empowered, God forbid, but they do want the world to grow in power because they want to harness that power themselves. But in the process of bringing out the 5G and the Internet of Things and all this massive amount of control and power, this panoptic surveillance system, they want to maintain control through the process of integrating it, implementing it promising people jobs for the foreseeable future, investing in those jobs. And, insider trading is the formation of a culture. I mean, what do you say at this point? But this is what politicians do and how they get rich. This is wrong. This is why term limits, and we have to circumvent this process of becoming corrupt but maintain the integrity for potential growth in society. But I'm getting a little deep. I'm just a dog trainer. I don't know what I'm talking about. But anyway, that said, back to the Ruby Ridge siege. This was really what sparked the modern day militia movements in society, where people felt like they had to organize and maintain a little group of people that would protect their personal and individual and local rights. If the federal government ever got weird and marched down their street and tried to kick in their door and take their guns, you'd have this little local body that would stand up for you in your little neighborhood with guns. And the law was designed in reality that those people who stand up against the government should be able to match them with their own arms. It's not that, they've twisted this into you believing that it's about hunting and all this, but in reality, it was totally designed so our government would never get control of us completely and never take our guns. So that in mind, there's a balance created. We should be able to possess any weapons that they possess. So, but that doesn't work that way, obviously. But when you think about it, why would you trust this government? You can ask all the liberals in the world, and I had this on my channel just before. Do you support socialism? Absolutely. It does wonderful things for society. Everybody gets all their money. They all get fed. They all get clothed. They all get an education. They all get jobs. Everything is just so peachy. Where does all that come from? What is socialism? Everything gets really quiet because there aren't no answers for that. It sounds great. It's a wonderful dream. But look what's happened. People die. It's a trap. Once they get you locked into that structure of taking care of you, then they take care of you right to the gas chamber. History repeats itself. Take a look around. How hard is it to wake up some of these people that think they're awake? Try telling someone that there is no Q who is convinced that now he is finally been proven that there's a connection between the White House and QAnon. Try to convince that person that that is not true, and then you'll see what you're dealing with. It's insane. We've got a lot of things running around, lots of cults of personality out there. Things are not what they seem. So anyway, let's look at a couple things here. I get off on tangents. So Ruby Ridge, in my opinion, I think a lot of people will agree, was the beginning of the militia movement in society all the way back in the mid 90s. Bottom line, how revolutionary volunteers evolved into right-wing private soldiers. Patriot Games, a brief history of militias in America. This talks about exactly what I just talked about. How the militia started in the 19th century and then they progressed. 1776, General George Washington. Okay, this is called, we'll go ahead and read this, and then I'll probably end this text for now, this cast for now. Let's go here. Mother Jones, Patriot Games, a brief history of militias in America. And then we'll move forward with this idea. First of all, this is a background. 1776, General George Washington gripes about the militiamen among his forces whose behavior and want of discipline has done great injury to other troops. So General George Washington gripes about the militiamen among his forces whose behavior and lack of discipline has done great injury to the other troops. So he's talking about how George Washington's complaining about the debauchery and the lack of discipline of these soldiers. So 1776, 1787, Constitutional Convention delegates clash over whether the militia should come under national control. As a compromise, the Constitution grants the federal governments the power to call up the militia, but leaves the appointment of officers to the states. The Second Amendment emphasized that a well-regulated militia is necessary for a free state. Okay, 1831. 1829, the nation's bulwark, a well-disciplined militia, Library of Congress. Here's just a picture of the 1829 printed. And this usually doesn't. My like I said, my computer is, I haven't quite figured it out yet. So anyway, an unmandatory militia, as 1831, as mandatory militia duty becomes unpopular, states began to abolish it. So let's back up first. Okay, in 1787, Constitutional Convention delegates clash over whether the militia should come under national control. As a compromise, the Constitution grants the federal government the power to call up the militia, but leaves the appointment of the officers to the states. So the feds can call up the militia, but the officers get appointed by the states. Okay, somebody's calling me right here. Hold on a second. That's my son. Okay, Nick, hey, we're on a, hold on. Hey, Nick. Hey, I'm on a live cast, so be aware that everything you say, people can hear you on a live broadcast. All right? Yes, sir. You're on the web page. Things are not what they seem, son. So what's up? Just going over a lot of crazy shit that's going on. I'm educating people about Ruby Ridge, which you may or may not remember when you were a little boy. I used to talk about all this shit. But Ruby Ridge was when Randy Weaver got shot up and his wife got killed and his baby got pretty much, I think his baby got killed too, and he's left alone, him and his daughter. So I was just going over that. That was the beginning of the Modern Militia Movement. How's the weather up there, son? You're the weatherman, huh? It is. What was the weather like today? Hey, Evan, what's up? You're on my Things Are Not What They Seem live broadcast, buddy. What are you doing? Any deep insight, any deep profound thoughts for us, Evan? Why are we here, Evan? Why do we exist on this planet, Evan? Give us your insight, my dear grandson. Probably wise. That's because he has such a deep understanding, there's no need to put it into words. That's all. All right, buddy. I'll give you a ring when I get off here, all right? All right, I love you, buddy. So I'll talk to you soon. Later. Bye. Family is the most important thing that we have, folks. If you don't love your family, you don't show them love, then who are you? What are you? So anyway, that was my boy. So we'll get into a lot of things that the government's been into, and a lot of it we've all been touched by in our families, and a lot of it is some really nefarious things that have been heartbreaking for all of us, and it's things are not what they seem. We've got to learn to look through this bullshit political drama theater that they present to us. What are you doing there, baby? I hear crunchy plastic things. What is that? What is that? No, we don't want that. No. So, okay, then we go. I'm not going to go into it tonight, but the next step is. I'm sorry, this isn't more structured. I'm doing this with my Rottweiler running around. I'm still learning OBS, but the bottom line is this. I mean, really, our government's been up to a lot of nefarious stuff for a long time, and it is the same people. And as we go through these events, and I don't have time now with the Rottweiler right, like I said, at my feet, in my hands, keeping me busy. We will start to point out in more detail the forces behind this stuff. I mean, it's not hidden. They come right out and say who they are and what their agendas are and how they've been moved around in government. The same people have just been moved around, and so they've been told on a need to know basis. They all know what their agendas are. They all know what their duties are. They're all read in, and they're the only ones read in this, and they're sticking together like glue because they've got a plan for us, and they're going to screw us and take control of us all. And they're going to walk. They're going to laugh all the way to the bank, or so they think. But they need to cry all the way to the tank. It needs to happen. So anyway, I do write music. It is what it is. I have my whole life. I used to write boxes and boxes and boxes of just poetry, depressing, heartbreaking stuff, and we all go through as people growing up and searching out our paths. And so a lot of the songs I've written my whole life are just strictly for myself. I have taken a few recently and turned them into a few videos on this website. It's more strictly for my own listening pleasure and just to document some things that I've done that I am kind of proud of, but I don't even know what they really mean. They do seem to be centered around the deep state of an oppressive government. A lot of my experiences, you have to realize, have been intense and really intense. And I'll go into these experiences when I have the newspaper articles to prove it. I don't want you to think I'm lying to you, a bunch of bullshit. I'm working on getting my newspaper access to all the archives to pull up articles as we tell the story of what we've seen and what I've learned in my journey about our government, what they're up to, and what if you dispel these, if you say these things without uh, physical proof, nobody's going to believe it. But there's some really nefarious, dark shit going on, and the government's right in the middle of it all. You have to believe that's what the black market and it's all about is they're in the middle of it all. So anyway, watch your six. Uh, have a good night. Please like, share, and subscribe. Things are not what they seem. Peace, everybody. Let the LARPers fucking run around in circles and chase their own tails. It's not worth the time, the effort, or the energy. All in fun. No, LARPers paradise. QAnon is a fucking horrible, horrible con that's stolen many money and now lives from people. So it's time to own up, guys. Time to own up, man. This shit needs to stop. Things are not what they seem. Be a man, don't be a pussy. You guys are cowards that hide behind these fake fucking avatars without your real names, man. Put it out there. Say who you are. If you can't say who you really are and then open your mouth and speak, then you're a fucking pussy as far as I'm concerned. So fucking deal with it, bro. That's the way I look at it. Have a good night, folks. Things are not what they seem. And don't ever underestimate an old fucking dog trainer either.